Hello War of the Visions fans, I'm Jackie Fox, and today I want to talk about probably one of my favorite FFB units of all time. This is the first unit that made me want to make internet content back in the FFBE days, even though this took the form of a post in a forum, a review of how to use her and how to properly equip her and how to get the most out of her. Because I had to recognize at the time, she wasn't a new unit when I was writing this, so it was in part getting the most of an older unit, but also because I felt like no one had ever really maximized her before. And I thought she was a really cool unit for that because there's a lot of ways that she can go. She's an inherently, in her build, a very conflicted unit, and this ties into her emotional conflict and turmoil. Her, she has this kind of aura around her that saps other people's power. She has this cruelty to her that is the inverse of her actual self outside of the armor. And this conflictedness is really apparent in this version of the kit as well. Because, and I want to say this about her, her teams were kind of middle of the road in performance. There were far more of them, and this is going to be a very long video compared to the others, because she can work on so many teams, because she has aspects of her kit that can really support a whole range of playstyles, and it's all about how you set her up and how you use her in those teams. That being said, she is not highly specialized in the way that a lot of characters are, and therefore she will not perform maximally on any of these teams, if that makes sense. She's almost never the best character to use, but there are a lot of situations where she is a good character to use. So a few of the aspects of her that make her interesting. Still Waters is one thing I want to point out. She has some buffs and debuffs, and I think that she works really well either with equipping her a TMR that has a strong debuff or a strong party buff, because she can lengthen the duration of those by one turn. So a lot of things that hit for 3 turns, or some of the newer things that hit for 4, will now be hitting for 4 and 5. And this could be used offensively or defensively. There's a lot of ways to go with this. Like, my favorite TMRs to use with her currently, Little Leela the Bold's TMR, which gives a Vitalize effect in a Diamond AoE. Lengthening that out to 4 turns is pretty cool. Blade Stream, famously, I've talked about this with her before. That is going to increase the attack debuff duration on that. Another one that I like recently is Shurika's TMR to increase the unit attack resistance buff duration. So there's a lot of ways to go with this, and this can make her especially powerful in this particular build with a bunch of different TMRs that she could get even more power out of. This isn't super unique, but it is interesting, and also this is a pretty cool version of this type of buff, because poison, sleep, and stun are actually pretty relevant and usually are somewhere in the meta. One of these 3 will be around. We just had a sleep meta where everything was putting things to sleep. There was a lot of stun in that meta too. This was especially relevant for that, but it will become relevant in the future again. She can go for more damage. There's a lot of ways to increase her penetrations as well. Doing that as well as increasing her speed, that's a really good way to go. These 2 would probably be the best for a purely offensive build, but if you wanted to increase some more buff and debuff duration stuff, with particular TMRs, because I don't think her kit 100% justifies this when you have 2 good passives like this, but with the right TMRs, you can really get the most out of her with that, and in the right meta, again, when these things are relevant, this is super cool. Otherwise, you probably want the speed, the penetrations, and the just raw magical power. Because one of the things that this girl can do, in addition to breaking water resistance and healing, which is a pretty cool version of the heal on counter, because it also does something kind of offensively for her. She's going to have really high penetration, so she might be able to get to full spirit and magic penetration. And she has a skill in here that gives her 40 of both. So this is going to increase her penetrations probably through the roof, potentially, with the right builds of her. Because, or at least one of the other... Oh, no magic pen. Okay. So she could get up to 80 spirit pin, 40 magic pin, and there are other ways to increase those. So this is really cool for turning on her damage. But this also creates, and this is the cool thing about her, and the thing that I think is most conveyed in this kit of any wotv kit, there were a lot of FFBE characters that had kind of combos where you use one skill and it turns other skills on, or it enhances other skills in some way. This turns on her damage. This is her damage mode, beast mode skill, right? If you need to break through water resistance even faster than your counter isn't hitting, this is a very large AoE that is going to break water resistance, perhaps multiple times. Like, this is kind of usually an LB effect, or it has been historically. There aren't a lot of things that break this high and this wide, essentially. Big damage on the skill too. Overflow also is going to give CT to one of her allies standing around her, so this will kind of hasten someone. But also chance to inflict poison and paralyze, so you could sap their HP, or you could kind of keep them from acting, or you could do both, and now they're losing 45% of their HP while they're just standing there doing nothing. That alone is pretty terrible. If it weren't for the water resistance break, which on certain teams is really going to enable the damage of other people, but she works really well on non-water elemental teams despite having 2 ways to break water resistance. This just does all of the things. It's a cool single target skill, so she can work pretty well on single target teams. It's going to break all attacks resistance, so that's pretty interesting. It makes her kind of versatile. It'll also break their AP. If you're using her max equipment, that is also going to break AP just on every hit. So you're going to get even more AP off, similar to the way that Tifa, Advent Children Tifa's gloves work. So that's another thing that she's going to do. With the right equipment, you could put her in an AP denial team. And this could be especially potent with the Blade Stream, where you're not giving them the chance to get bonus AP at the beginning of the match. So they're coming in with only a few attacks in the chamber, essentially. But then you can start chipping away at that lower AP to make sure that they hit a wall faster, and maybe even have trouble recovering if she's fast enough. She is relatively fast. Another thing, this is just, again, another path for her, right? She has a double revive, a double auto revive skill for herself and someone else. It also lowers her hate, which is pretty cool. This is in the vein of Sodali and Shalza. And there are a lot of characters now who need this. Like, historically, Dark Sephiroth, but also more recently, Shurika and Cypher, both being characters that really need some way of not getting one shot. And this is one of the characters that can do that. And being a non-gacha character, the fact that she can step in and take over that role and still do all these other things is pretty cool. But again, she doesn't do any of these things to the max. Like, if you really wanted a healer that could do this on your team, this isn't your girl. She does have White Mage. She's probably never going to use any of it, and she will likely apply Auto Revive to you, but she's not going to have the heals that a healer would, you know. So she has just a bit of that in her kit. A little bit more like Sodali, really, than Luciel. Or even Lina, who's more of a healer support buffer type. Also, Elemental Power. This is another buddy and self. It gives her a magic damage barrier, which kind of goes in with all of her other ways of resisting magic. She is good at resisting magic damage in general. But also, all elemental resistance for 10%, and defense and spirit of 20%, all for 3 turns for herself and ally. So this is a good all-around way of creating 2 different types of barriers against almost everything in the game. So really good at reducing damage in a very general way. Oh, no, that goes up to 20% and 30 defense and spirit. So 20% reduction in one way, 30% reduction in another way. That's 2 layers of onion for her. Very, very good skill. Sometimes, though, when she has an extra buff in her kit especially, she won't have time to do Reviving Stream, Elemental Power, and whatever that buff is, so you might be sacrificing something for that. Again, how she performs and what she does and how she supports your team is highly variable based on what buffs you turn off potentially, what equipment you're running with her, etc. But also, she can break people down like nobody's business. Aquatic Retribution, her LB, is more potent of a break than Mega Flare. It's going to break Spirit by 38 for 3 turns, potentially 4 turns if you're running Still Waters. And this skill is a good argument for why you might want to do that. It's going to do that before damage, so that damage is going to get boosted. 240 mod Diamond AoE, huge damage across the board, but it's also going to break defense and AoE resistance after doing damage. Now, arguably, it should perhaps, and this would be an upgrade for it, break that AoE resistance before doing damage, and it would do even more. But this is really going to open them up to basically everything, and the whole team being opened up to big damage is pretty cool. But I didn't mean to do a unit review for this. I just love this character, and I think getting a baseline of what her kit does and all the variety of things that she can do to support your team gives you a better idea of how she can flexibly fit into a variety of different teams, you know? Because you see the whole, you think like, oh, well, this character really needs re-raise. Somebody needs to give this character re-raise. If you see that whole, she's a good character, she's a good fit for you. If that's all you need, if you don't necessarily need a dedicated healer, and characters like Cypher and Shurika don't need that as much. So you can get away with a character like this. If you want the breaks, if you want somebody to build up your elemental resistance, if you want somebody to give you that last 30 defense and spirit to kind of wall off a tank, you know, she can do that really well too. There are a lot of things she can do. If you want to put her on a Marlboro team, where you're trying to inflict as many statuses as possible, Mist is going to be a big deal, potentially inflicting poison and paralyze at the same time is pretty impactful to that, so she can really support that. There's a lot of good characters for that now, but at the same time she can also be part of an anti-Marlboro team, because some of the most impactful of those are Sleep and Stun, which really take people out of the fight. So if you strategically give her resistances to other things as well, then she can survive through a lot of that pretty effectively. And looking into her kit, she's also going to have Confusion and Stop resistance, as well as a little bit of Blind resistance. So basically 5 statuses that aren't going to touch her. Confusion is also pretty common with this. Stop has never been particularly common, but it is pretty impactful, so it's cool that she has it. And first, I do want to explain, this is in part, the reason I'm doing this now, if you missed the first episode of this, it's not just to show off Volca, although that's always a nice benefit of things like this. It was because we got the Guardian's Crystal, we got some forewarning about that, because we're global, we always get time, you know? Even if it is just a month now. And we were able to prepare, and I was able to build up a Guardian's Crystal +5, and it's a big boost to their stats. Now you have to adjust their trust runes a bit to get the most out of it, and you can add some passives to them this way by kind of moving a lot of the stat-based stuff off of the trust runes entirely, because it's now going to be taken care of by this piece of equipment. But while the numbers look pretty big here, it's not as big as you might think. It is probably the most impactful piece of equipment outside of like the Blood Sword, and some other legendary reliquary stuff, or really, really high-end stuff. This is one of the best pieces of equipment in the game for a specific character. But there is some competition for that. But this is still going to make up exactly what the Veritas need to really be able to compete, because their kits are amazing. So they just need the raw stats, and this gives them those raw stats. So one of the things that I did in this video, or for this, was I tested 13 teams for the first 3 Veritas against each other. And I also did the usual data collection, but I also tested them against a high-level guild. So this is going to be rank 159 at the moment, so pretty high up there, but maybe not the tippity top. The all-water version of the Veritas or of the Waters team works pretty well. These are really the two of the newer water units. You could also definitely use Summer Glaciella here. She's a pretty effective tank. But this particular team, in my testing, came in 7th, so dead center. It did, however, get 66 stars going up against my guild. That put it in 3rd place overall. This was behind 2 Veritas of the Heavens teams, and there's another one coming in 5th place. But we are going to talk about another one of the teams that did really well in my guild battle testing as well a little bit later in this video. But this one right here, I think, you know, Joom could definitely use the re-raise if you set it up for that. They could also definitely use elemental resistances, especially going into a match like this. There isn't a lot of status here, so she really brings that to the team. That curveball can be helpful in some cases. But really, this team just needs to take damage slower and build its damage faster, and she's really effective at helping them, especially with Elemental Fortress and re-raise, although not on Elda. He doesn't need the re-raise, he already has re-raise in his kit. She does a really good job of making it so that they can heal back with their HP absorb skills and that kind of thing. And that can mean the world to these two characters, because they can rip the meta apart with proper support. Now, you might argue that in today's meta, where we both have explosive damage and incredible durability and healing, that maybe they would be better supported by a full healer. But until we see a modern, until we see a modern healer for water, like this is the all water variant, you know. Even I think White Mage is enabled. We may at some point in this video see her use Isunaga or Isuna, I forget which one's in her kit. I think it's Isunaga though. To actually cure Curse off of one of her teammates. But you can, she's generally speaking going to be in the front row unless you do something about that, especially if you're not running her in still waters, because she's going to have that extra agility. Even on this fast of a team, she just likes to run to the front lines and mess people up, you know? Well, but, you know, she really needs those penetrations, because even with the crystal, her magic stat is not that high, especially for modern units. Like, looking at kind of a sub-modern attacker here, he's close to 2,000 attack. So that's pretty big. So don't expect her to do quite that damage, but she is going to have good penetrations and a lot of ability to do a lot of other things with her attacks. Looking at a more modern unit, 2200 attack is about where she's at, and also looking at like tank-like HP. So again, with big HP pools like this on both of these characters, you want to increase essentially their effective HP. And her buffs are a really good way of boosting that. And I think the Still Waters version, you know, just applying that Elemental Fortress to even 1 or 2 characters on this team can really, really support what the team is doing quite well. I showed you this team in another video. This was in the Veritas video as well. The user that built this team is a Transcendent Mind, so they came in first place in Arena. This was a really hard team to beat with almost anything, although I am, at some point in this series, going to be showing you videos of teams that did beat this team. It was quite good, but not impossible. And I think, you know, that's not necessarily the characters. This is a strong, you know, group, but I also think that there's a lot of credit to be given to the person who built this team as well. Because he or she or they or whomstever did a really good job building this one. And again, you really gotta love the power of Vina's long range healing. And against this team where a lot of the DPS is physical, that physical damage reduction is just key there. So, you know, we did some serious damage. We came very, very close to breaking through to their healer, and I don't think she would have been able to take us by any means, but we just kind of came up a turn short. So that was actually a much closer match than it ended up, but that's how it goes sometimes. Even though I am running the blade stream on her in this build, since you have to have the same, I'm not changing formations or changing equipment. This is all done through the mock battle system. So all of these fights were calculated at the same time with the same equipment. So it also kind of shows you one of the problems with blade stream, because I've been a really big proponent of it. Like, using it tactically in arena is pretty amazing, because if you know what teams really get wrecked by that technique, then you can mess them up. But against a team like this that relies on AP cost reduction and doesn't use AP restore, it's basically a waste of a turn. I wish you would have used re-raise on someone, at the very least. I don't think it would have really changed that matchup too much, but would have been nice. So this team did pretty well. It's a little bit of a bait team, although, you would really want a second Earth unit, but Ashen Mont going up against a Lightning team, he can usually take them all out, and we're going to see that and how his matchup does. But we actually didn't have as much trouble clearing Lightning teams with any of the Veritas of the Waters teams as you might expect. This team in particular actually did the best of all of the Veritas of the Waters teams. It came in 5th place overall, and it came in number 1 with its defensive average. Now, none of these teams did super well on defense, necessarily, but this one did pretty well on defense. And arguably it's just the fact that, like, people see Veritas of the Waters and they're like, oh yeah, this is definitely a dedicated water team. Like, this is a water themed team. It's got Veritas of the Waters up front. So it's got to be all water. Like, she breaks water resistance, right? But no, Ashen Mont can, like, 3v1 Lightning sometimes. So this team is really good at catching people off guard on defense. And there's a variant of this, which I think is an even better bait team, that actually tied with it. We'll talk about in a later video. But the other thing that I want to mention here, this got 58 stars out of 78 versus my guild. And that is going to put it just below, I want to say, like, maybe 6th or 7th place overall in terms of, how people, or how teams did against the entire guild. So pretty good performance. Now, this team shouldn't be too bad into Wind, but Wind is definitely gonna screw with Mont in a bad way. Still, I don't know, man. If you get silence on the mages, then there's no helping him. He always has the chance to do that. Pretty cool. Or at least I think he always has the chance. Well, no, he always has the chance to do that. So this is going to show you exactly how well Mont is going to perform against this Lightning team. Now again, don't give Mont too much credit for this performance, because this team already does well into Lightning. Like, these two characters, Joom and Veritas of the Waters, can really mess with Lightning. However, and we'll see other versions of this team that don't have Mont do really well against teams like this. But at the same time, he's definitely helping. Like, he definitely shores this matchup up versus Lightning, while also being the perfect, Veritas of the Waters specifically, I think, makes kind of the perfect bait to bring people in, because you're never quite sure who's behind Joom necessarily, because she could be on a greatsword team. It's not as likely if you've got a mage on the team, but it could be 2 greatswords and Luciel, 2 greatswords and support, that kind of thing. But if it's Veritas Waters up front, people get kind of confident that it's a water team of some sort. And, since water teams are largely physical right now, what you would expect from a water team is two physical units behind him. So Mont doesn't betray that at all. He makes the stats come out much like a water team that would, say, have Elda instead. Maybe a little bit higher in the attack, but Elda, as we saw, had pretty high attack himself. Now, one of her issues, especially not getting re-raise off, which on this short of a map, and with the disadvantage of, in her case, especially in matches like this, the disadvantage of Blade Stream taking up one of her buff slots, she's not going to do well on the front lines in a lot of matchups. Just the AoE damage, even if she's not being targeted, is going to hurt her. But also getting that hate down is pretty helpful for her in keeping a squishy unit kind of safe from opportunistic KOs. And that comes with a reviving stream as well. So this is kind of a drawback to the Still Waters build, which is what we're going to be seeing. I think most variations of this are gonna do that. I don't know. I might have done some where she increases people's agility with the Lil Leela the Bold TMR, but I think a lot of this is going to be Blade Stream. So she's got her attack enabled. If she can survive to do damage, she is going to have pretty full penetrations. I don't think Cypher specifically is all that good at dealing with magic. And they did definitely start a chain for him, but he also does have man resistance. And again, she's a woman, but it works. So that sleep kind of got immediately dispelled, but it is going to increase his damage to Cypher. That helped us get him down to a chunk, which should get us the KO now. Can we follow through? We might... Oh, yeah, because Fina isn't able to heal us up all the way, but our courages have been expended. So we weren't able to survive to follow that up, but we were about to push through their healing. Good job, Day. Again, that was a pretty tough team for most variations. As was this one. This is a really dominant team. It's always really scary to get matched up against this in like free match, because these teams are just all really strong together. Although, arguably, you should probably swap like Gilgamesh and Sephiroth. I'm just spitballing here. I don't know exactly why you did that. Maybe this is, an acceptable drawback to get your buffs right. But you really want the initial hate to be on Gilgamesh, because Gilgamesh is a courage unit. So you want Luciel's re-raise to hit the courage unit so that Gilgamesh can come in with courage and re-raise, because he's already kind of intimidating to chew through to begin with. And if you give him 2 backstops to his power, and he's able, especially if you try to get through him really quickly, which is kind of how you have to go with him, because he can do stuff like that and just wipe teams. Especially if you're trying to get through him particularly quickly, he's still going to have potentially Seeking Plume up, which means he's still going to have the potential to heal back up after the courage or the re-raise or whatever. So he could get himself back in the game a lot quicker with that. That being said, this team did still win. It is quite impressive, but again, like all of these teams, we are going to see teams that were capable of beating this as well, which is also pretty impressive. Here is a less water-focused version of the team. This is going to maximize a lot of single target breaks and single target damage. Basically, the theory here is that Ashen Mont is going to enable Elia the Alabaster to do even more ridiculous damage with Stag Impact. And since Mont has CT up and Stag Impact has CT down, that might help Mont lap them and really build some crazy chains. This team came in second place on defense, but it only scored 52 stars when going up against the guild, and that definitely held it back. But pretty good defensive showing. Offense was roughly average. This is a little bit janky and a little bit hard to build vision cards for, because it's a little bit all over the place, both in terms of elements and jobs. There isn't really a good synergy here, and that's definitely holding it back. But again, like the last team, just the combination of Veritas and Waters and Ash and Mont is working on defense. This is a very good defensive combination, no matter who you're pairing with it. But I just think this is another decent option for working in there that might even be better into Lightning, because at least you don't have a third water unit or a second water unit on the team. Even though I think, like, generally speaking, Joom is a better character than Alaya. On this particular team, Alaya, I think, does better into this specific matchup. But the point of testing this against the entire guild at once was to see how it did against a variety of matchups. This is just the one that I imagine that it has the most often on defense, which is the one that I think is really the most important for this team specifically. So this is the matchup to be watching. That being said, I am getting kind of beat on here. In fact, I think the other team was doing a little bit better. That said, I can't speak for the other team, but this is my Lightning team before I pulled Ramada. So maybe I just have a slightly better Lightning team than the other one I tested against. But as you can see, the Lightning did alright, but just did not have enough gas left in the tank to be able to chew through Mont. But as you can see, Alaya doesn't have the most HP, but she has incredible speed and about as much attack as Mont here has. And Mont didn't have that much HP in this build either, necessarily. Maybe the Phoenix is a mistake on him. I think I just kind of left that on there. Probably should have swapped that up. I mean, maybe the evocation giving him like a secondary form of heal would be interesting, but it doesn't often come to that. You shouldn't depend on people using Espers in your strategy for winning. You should probably use an Esper that benefits him from the beginning of the battle. But I think I just overlooked that. I was building a ton of teams for this video and trying to get all these mocks in before guild battle started, so I kind of had a limited time window, and I'm pretty busy in the mornings, so I only had so much time to do this. And that meant building some teams on the fly and leaving the wrong Esper on. But as you can see, like, there are a lot of things that this team does beat, despite the fact that it had kind of like a middle ground, middle of the road performance, maybe even a little bit subpar in how it went up against the total guild. So here's some offensive matchups, just with kind of some other things. Because this is kind of a varied team, I wanted to see what a more synergized team would be like. Also, I keep looking for opportunities to see Irvine do really well, because he has the same type of follow-up skill that Gilgamesh does, just maybe minus the healing factor. Ooh. Well, now my whole team has HP absorb. That's pretty cool. I forgot I put, that's Alphonse Elric's armor. Oh no, he can't equip Claw, can he? It must have been. I didn't see the attack up though. Maybe I just missed it. Okay, so this team again, and I actually recorded a bunch of matches across this series against this particular team, and I don't actually remember which of my teams managed to make it through it, but so this could be a win or a loss. But as you can see, this team having a different setup, we're now probably not doing like a Still Waters buff. Oh, no, I don't think I changed her passives or her support skills. But this is the first one that we've seen that has been able to get the re-raise up, and it's already come in handy. And it looks like we might, yeah, no, we chewed through Gilgamesh. Wow. Okay, they're down to their healer. I don't think she has like a full life. Okay. Maddening Verse. So that's what, Grimoire Keeper sub job that she's running for. Yep, Grimoire Keeper. She's running to have some damage skills because I think she only has one in her main kit. More HP absorb. I feel like especially lightning units and lightning stuff needs HP absorb. At least older stuff, you know, Ramada has it, and that's definitely a boon to lightning, but I think lightning is in a place to need Luciel more than other elements, because they don't have as many newer characters that have self-healing techniques. That being said, like if you were kind of following the strike life, then you probably have Uriel at 99. You probably have that cloth armor that you can equip to give everybody, I think it's like 35% HP absorb for 3 turns. That's another interesting one potentially to put on to Folka. Veritas of the Waters, because it would be interesting to see her lengthen the buff of, or lengthen the duration of that buff as well. And it would be equipable to her. Also, that's much easier to get than, especially for some of you, waiting around for Full Metal Alchemist to come back. To get a 90 cost tank. Which is kind of awkward. So, did not do well against that. This is a good, like... You can see that Cypher is kind of taking the role of King Bradley here. This is a relatively common Earth composition with that one swap out, essentially. He's quite powerful. He does a lot of the things that Bradley does, but better in many ways, and is a lot more durable and hard to take off the map, at least before he's taken out someone himself. We should have a pretty neutral matchup into Ice, but maybe, just maybe, we will have the opportunity to punch Joom really hard for big damage. That's what I'm hoping for here. Oh, got the dodge, but yeah, a lot of... Oh, and because she got the dodge, she didn't get the AoE or defense breaks, just the spirit break. Folka is down, did not have re-raise in this particular fight. I don't think Mont is going to make it up fast enough. No. Dang. Ooh. Even Oldoa's doing some good damage now. Yikes. I think that's it for this one. Yeah. Okay, can't win them all. Again, I'm kind of picking out what were the most interesting losses and the most interesting victories for each of these teams. So here's another one. Let's see how it does into all Earth, into a more standard Earth composition. No, that doesn't make any sense. Okay, we do not have the Blade Stream, so we're going with the Reviving Stream instead. There's a lot of streams going on here for Veritas of the Waters. She's big into streaming. Very big into streaming. Again, she would also be pretty cool with the Imperial Blessing. Yeah, was it the Vulture's Wing? Name of her hat. Unfortunately, not an accessory, even though it is just a hat. Counts as clothing. Okay. Once again, didn't get the defense or AoE break on Bradley because we missed. Speaking of miss. Ooh. I was hoping she would use her LB. Go ahead and start breaking the lightning resistance. While there's other people on the field to kind of support her. Okay, well, Folka's staying on the field, at least. Yeah, see, she lost her chance already. Well, it's going to be hard to recover from this one. Let's see what you can do, Folka. Ooh, missed. That could be really strong. Landed the paralysis on Mont. And queued his turn up so that he could follow this up with some damage. Not enough to take anybody off the board, though. We do have a reprieve from Mont, but I think even Bradley might be able to finish this one off. Yep. Oh, yeah, I forgot about that re-raise. Oh, man. She's going to heal around us, though, and then we're going to have basically a fully healed team to beat. Yikes. Just didn't push them fast enough. And that's one of the problems when you're going into a matchup versus a team that is kind of at its full power in terms of VCs and elemental synergies and all of that, is it can just be really hard to push through where they're at if you don't have at least good synergies through your vision cards. And these multi-elemental teams can be a bit of a problem. With Veritas of the Waters being a devout, she also doesn't line up with Shurika either. But this is a very similar idea to the previous team with Alaya, except that I'm using Shurika here as the alternate single target damage dealer. And this also means that we're doing single target damage in physical with Mont and in magical with Shurika. So this is going to trigger a lot of other people's weaknesses. But this is also going to make this a better team against Earth, I would hope. So we just saw the matchup versus the Alaya version of this team. Let's see if swapping Alaya for Shurika does much to help. I suspect it will. But also, this particular team kind of did worse. So it got 57 stars on offense versus my guild. That's pretty good. Kind of middle of the road. It's definitely better than the 52 that the other version got. So Shurika in general is a good swap for Alaya the Alabaster. Good upgrade there. However, the thing that held this team back and put it all the way in 10th place as the lowest ranked Veritas of the Waters team tested, nobody's using it in guild battle. I had no guild battle data to pull from. For some reason, no one else has thought this was a good idea. Because Veritas of the Waters and Ashen Mont are already an amazing combination on defense. We've already seen that on 2 teams so far. So basically locking out another safe element, because sometimes you see a water unit and you're playing lightning and you're like, you know, that could be a bait team. But if you're playing earth and you see a water unit, you're like, even if that is a bait team, it's water and earth. We can take that. You know, because really, as strong as this team can be, it only needs Mont to shut down the lightning matchup. And since you're putting Folka in slot 1, that's what's going to be targeting you most of the time. So it is kind of a niche-er matchup, but it is interesting to see a side-by-side comparison on how well that works. Now, this team shouldn't have too much trouble in general versus Ice. This would be another safe elemental matchup, for instance. Like, if you acknowledge that Veritas of the Waters could be a bait unit, then she's probably being run with Earth. you shouldn't have any trouble there with ice, and as opposed to earth, which also would have been a safe element to play into it there, you're not expecting Shurika to be on board. And, you know, this is potentially better, right? Because now Shurika doesn't have an advantage over your team. So it's less neutral of a match, and it's a little bit to my disadvantage. In addition to the fact that this is a well-synergized team versus one that admittedly has some problems with its vision cards. That being said, my units on my side are way newer than the Ice team. Velas is an old man. And while Jaden is almost as new as Elia the Alabaster, he's just not as good. He does some cool stuff, but he's just not quite there. It's really rough with him because he has a lot of promise, and he does really well into physical in some cases, especially physical unit attack stuff. Not good into magic, though. Completely bypasses his HP barrier, most of his defenses. But just vaguely underwhelming, you know what I mean? So this isn't the strongest Ice team. You know, it doesn't have a Gilgamesh. That would be a big deal. It doesn't have a Tifa. That would be a pretty big deal. Not that I don't have Tifa on that account, I just... this team has a good synergy of being able to do magic damage and being able to deal with physical units. Also, I don't have Gilgamesh. Or A2. But I do have Tifa. That would make this a more updated team. But we're kind of seeing what this team does well and why I'm not using those units in some ways. Because Mont is having a lot of trouble doing damage to them. So, in his stead, Folka has taken to poisoning people and paralyzing people. It's hard to see it over there. But who's still alive? Oh, Oldoa. Oldoa is paralyzed in the background. Velas is poisoned and immobilized now. And just, she put him out of his misery. So, it is an older team. I will give it that. But it's not a bad one. It does pretty well at what it does. And we saw it doing well at that during this matchup. Even though it is an Ice team, though, because it is such a strong versus physical, but not necessarily other things like magic, and this is a 2 magic units team, it is pretty good into it. In fact, it did better than when Shurika had the elemental advantage. This is another cool team. So, Summer Elsorel. Love being able to use Summer Elsorel. She was my first carry unit for this account. And I caught wind of her doing really well in guild battle. All of a sudden. So I looked it up. I crunched the numbers. And then I tested her myself, and boy, she did really well. As you can see, there are a lot of teams that she cleared. This team came in 6th place, so this is just below the Ashen Mont for 2nd best Veritas of the Waters team that I tested. And it came in 1st place on offense. In fact, it came in 1st place on offense with 5 stars on average. It had 2 days where it averaged 6 stars. Now, when I say averaged, there weren't many people using this. So, and I did have one missing defensive day that I could not find a replacement for. So it is potentially just one person playing this team on JP right now in guild battle in top 500. And it's good. What can I say? Like, it is very powerful on offense. It does what it does quite well. And as you can see, in general, it does okay into lightning. Now, for whatever reason, even though this is like a physically offensive lightning team, for sure, that didn't help Summer Elsorel, who was like, I mean, even for a water unit, she feels allergic to lightning. Still, she held them up enough, and they held them up enough that we were able to get to the other side, and now Joom is just going to have a real easy time matching against Resnick. No way Resnick can overwhelm her, and she can just kind of heal herself back. So this team is pretty strong because, and kind of for a few of the same reasons that the previous team was strong with Shuriken, in that just adding another magic damage dealer in here has made this team better at evading the defenses of the meta, because we are generally in a more physical meta. So often when you add a strong magic unit to your team, you're hitting people where they're not expecting. And this is already a Veritas of the Waters team, so we already have one mage with good penetrations on the team. So adding a second one can really focus it into beating that type of team. I think that's part of what explains why this team performed so well. But speaking of really good performance versus Gasol Union, this team got 62 out of 78 stars. And this puts it in 4th place in total for all the teams that I tested in Guild Battle. And 2nd place of all the Veritas of the Waters teams. Again, the one that did best on offense was Veritas of the Waters, Elda, and Joom, which got 66 stars. So I got a total of 4 more stars in this team. But as you can see, like, especially on offense, having a mono elemental team is very powerful, because you want to go for that highest level of power, because you get to choose who you're going up against, at least kind of. And because of that, you have the ability to avoid traps. Again, bait teams exist, but you at least know you have a good matchup with one of the characters on that team. You know what I mean? So even though bait does exist, mono elemental teams can get away with not being complicated on offense. Whereas that is very difficult and a drawback, and a thing that makes, you know, a team that's very easy to read is very bad on defense, typically. Because if you know how to read it, you know how to counter it, and then you go in with the right thing. But this brings us to the last team of the video, and the point where I want to thank you for watching. Remind you that the free-to-play option for YouTube is to like and subscribe, but also let me know what you're thinking in the comments. While you're on your way down there, click the link in the description to check out all of the rest of the Jackie Fox Media universe, the other YouTube channels, the podcast, the books, the ways to donate to the channel. All that stuff will be found in the description. I hope you really enjoy Veritas of the Waters. I hope it wasn't too much of a turnoff for some of the audience that I kind of went on about her for a while in the beginning, but she is a very complicated character, and I think that you have to understand that complexity to understand all the different ways that she can be used, because one type of Veritas of the Waters might work in your team, and another might not. So understanding the many faces of Folka is key to using her effectively. And with all that being said, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.